The alien ship landed in the ocean with barely a splash, but Dr. Kim Tae-ho saw it happen from his research vessel 3 miles away. He was studying deep-sea creatures when the strange metal object fell from the sky like a silver teardrop. Most humans would have panicked or called for help, but Tae-ho did something different. He grabbed his camera and started recording everything. Commander Vex stepped out of his scout ship onto the floating platform his crew had deployed. He expected to see primitive beings running in fear like every other species they had discovered. Instead, he saw a human male standing calmly on a nearby boat, pointing some kind of device at them. The human showed no fear at all, which confused Vex greatly. Vex belonged to the Altarian Empire, which had spent thousands of years exploring the galaxy. Every intelligent species they found were prey animals who had somehow developed technology. The Zelons looked like giant rabbits and ate only plants. The aquatic Murs were peaceful fish people who spent their time singing and making art. The Korthans were bird-like creatures who flew away at the first sign of danger. But this human was different. Vex noticed the human's eyes first. They faced forward like a hunter's eyes, not to the sides like prey animals. The human's teeth were sharp and designed for tearing meat. Even the way the human moved reminded Vex of the big cats on his homeworld that hunted other animals for food. Dr. Kim Tae-ho called the Korean Navy on his radio, and within 2 hours, Captain Lee So-min arrived with 3 warships. Vex expected the military leader to bow or show respect like other species did when meeting superior technology. Instead, Captain Lee studied the aliens the way a predator studies potential threats. She walked around their ship looking at weak points and counting how many aliens were present. Her hand never moved far from her weapon, even though she smiled and spoke politely. Vex realized with growing horror that this human was not impressed by their technology. She was planning how to fight them if necessary. When the aliens activated their universal translator, Captain Lee asked direct questions about their weapons and military capabilities. Other species usually asked about trade or culture first. This human wanted to know immediately if the aliens were dangerous and how to defeat them if they became enemies. Vex tried to explain that the Altarian Empire was peaceful and only wanted to establish friendly contact. Captain Lee listened, but her eyes never stopped moving. She watched every alien constantly and noticed when they were nervous or afraid. She could tell that these beings were not warriors despite their advanced ships. Dr. Park Ji-woo arrived from Seoul University the next day to serve as Earth's cultural ambassador. She was a small woman who specialized in studying different societies. The aliens expected her to be less threatening than the military captain, but they were wrong again. Dr. Park asked questions about alien history that revealed disturbing things about humans. She wanted to know if aliens had ever hunted other species to extinction. When the alien said no, she explained that humans had killed off giant mammals called mammoths and many other large animals thousands of years ago. She described human wars, where millions died, and spoke about it the way someone might discuss the weather. The aliens learned that humans had developed over 200 ways to kill other humans and considered this normal military knowledge. They had built weapons that could destroy entire cities and actually used them on each other. Commander Vex sent reports back to the Galactic Council, but his superiors did not believe him. How could one small planet be dangerous to an empire that controlled 1,000 worlds? They told Vex he was being paranoid and ordered him to continue peaceful contact. The aliens spent 3 weeks studying human culture and became more frightened each day. They learned that human children played games about hunting and fighting. Human entertainment was full of stories about violence and war. Even human sports were often about defeating opponents through physical force. Dr. Kim Hye-jin, a psychologist from Seoul, observed the aliens carefully and realized they were prey animals who had never developed true predator instincts. They had technology and intelligence but no killer instinct. They could not understand how humans had kept their predator nature while building advanced civilization. The aliens discovered that humans had evolved from apes that hunted in groups. They had spent millions of years climbing to the top of their food chain by being smarter and more ruthless than everything else. Even after developing technology and culture, they never lost their basic nature as hunters. Captain Lee demonstrated human military tactics during a training exercise near the coast. The aliens watched as human soldiers moved through terrain using cover and concealment to approach targets without being seen. They worked together like a pack of wolves surrounding prey. When the exercise was over, the aliens realized that humans had turned warfare into an art form. Every movement was calculated, and every action served a purpose. These were not primitive beings with simple weapons. These were evolved predators who had learned to use technology to make themselves even more dangerous. Vex tried one more time to warn the Galactic Council about what they had discovered. He explained that humans were apex predators who had never been conquered by anyone. Their entire planet was controlled by various groups of these predators who competed with each other constantly. The Council dismissed his warnings and ordered him to begin formal diplomatic contact. They could not believe that a species of predators could be intelligent enough to develop space travel. Every successful species in the galaxy had evolved from herbivores who learned to cooperate peacefully. Dr. Park Ji-woo smiled when she heard about the Council's decision to begin formal diplomacy. She had spent weeks learning about alien psychology and knew exactly how frightened they were. The aliens thought they could intimidate humans the way they intimidated other species, but they had no idea what they were dealing with. As commander, Vex prepared for the next phase of contact. He sent one final message to his superiors. The humans were not like any species they had encountered before. They were predators who thought like predators and acted like predators even when they were being diplomatic. But the worst part was still to come because the aliens had only met Koreans so far. They had no idea that Earth contained many different types of humans, and some were much more dangerous than others. Soon they would learn about Americans and discover what true ruthlessness looked like. The first official meeting between Earth and the Galactic Council was scheduled for Geneva, but everything changed when the Americans arrived. Lieutenant Colonel Mike Johnson walked into the conference room, followed by Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, and the aliens immediately noticed something different about these humans. Dr. Kim Hyejin had been studying alien psychology for weeks, and she watched their reaction carefully. Where the Korean representatives had made the aliens nervous, these Americans made them truly afraid. The difference was obvious even to untrained observers. Colonel Johnson did not bow or show any diplomatic courtesy. He sat down at the conference table and stared directly at Commander Vex with the cold eyes of someone who had killed before and would do it again if necessary. His smile showed teeth that looked sharp and predatory. The aliens learned that America was different from other human nations in ways that terrified them. Dr. Lim Min-seo, a historian from Busan, had prepared a briefing about American culture that made the Galactic Council representatives step backward when they heard it. She explained that most human civilizations had developed over thousands of years, with long periods of peace between wars. They had been invaded many times and learned to think defensively. America was different because it had spent only 200 years expanding across an entire continent and fighting everyone who tried to stop them. Americans had fought a civil war that killed more of their own people than all their other wars combined, and they did it over ideas about freedom and slavery. The aliens could not understand how a species would destroy itself over principles instead of simply compromising to survive. Colonel Johnson began explaining American military doctrine to the terrified aliens. He spoke casually about total war and overwhelming force as if these were normal concepts that every intelligent species would understand. His voice never changed tone even when describing weapons that could kill millions. The aliens discovered that Americans believed any problem could be solved with enough firepower and determination, where other humans might negotiate or find peaceful solutions. Americans preferred to eliminate threats completely. They had fought wars on multiple continents at the same time, and considered this normal military planning. Sergeant Rodriguez showed the aliens pictures of American military equipment while explaining how it worked. The aliens saw tanks that could destroy buildings and aircraft that could level entire cities. But what scared them most was how Rodriguez talked about these weapons like tools for everyday use. Dr. Kim Tae-ho tried to provide context that would help the aliens understand American thinking. He explained that Americans had never been successfully invaded by a foreign power. They had no experience of defeat or occupation, which made them believe they were naturally superior to other nations. The aliens learned that America had developed something called the military-industrial complex, which could produce weapons and soldiers on a scale that defied comprehension. They could build thousands of tanks and planes while training millions of soldiers all at the same time. Commander Vex asked about American military history and received answers that gave him nightmares. Americans had dropped nuclear weapons on cities full of civilians just to end a war faster. They had burned entire forests in Vietnam and bombed cities in Iraq until nothing remained but rubble. But what made Americans truly dangerous was their attitude toward warfare. Colonel Johnson explained that Americans did not just fight to win battles. They fought to make sure their enemies could never threaten them again. Total victory was not just the goal, it was the only acceptable outcome. The aliens discovered that Americans had a cultural belief that violence was often the best solution to complex problems. They had phrases like peace through strength and speak softly but carry a big stick that revealed how they really thought about diplomacy. Dr. Park Ji-woo watched the aliens' growing fear with scientific interest. She realized that herbivore species, who had never developed true predator instincts, could not understand the American mindset. They thought like prey animals even after developing technology and intelligence. Americans were different because they came from a culture of apex predators who had conquered an entire continent through superior firepower and ruthless determination. They had fought Native Americans, British, French, Spanish, Mexicans, and each other, without ever losing their fundamental belief that might makes right. The aliens learned about American exceptionalism, which was the belief that America was naturally better than other nations and had the right to impose its values on the rest of the world. This was not arrogance, it was genuine conviction based on centuries of military success. Colonel Johnson described American Special Forces with obvious pride. These were elite soldiers trained to operate behind enemy lines and eliminate targets with surgical precision. They could infiltrate any location and kill anyone without being detected or caught. The aliens asked about rules of warfare and were horrified to learn that Americans believed rules only applied when fighting other civilized nations. Against enemies they considered barbaric or evil, Americans felt free to use any tactics necessary to achieve victory. Sergeant Rodriguez explained that Americans had spent decades studying asymmetric warfare and counterinsurgency. They knew how to fight enemies who used unconventional tactics and how to turn civilian populations against their own governments through psychological operations. Dr. Lim Min-seo provided historical context that made the aliens even more afraid. Americans had defeated the British Empire, the Spanish Empire, the German Reich, and the Soviet Union through a combination of industrial capacity and strategic thinking that no other nation could match. The aliens realized they were dealing with predators who had evolved beyond simple hunting into something far more dangerous. Americans had turned warfare into a science and applied industrial methods to the business of killing their enemies. Commander Vex sent urgent reports to the Galactic Council explaining that humans were not just predators, but that Americans were predators who had perfected the art of making war. They had weapons that could destroy planets and the will to use them if threatened, but the Council still did not understand what they were facing because herbivore species could not comprehend predator psychology. They thought the aliens were exaggerating because they had never met a species that considered violence a natural solution to problems. The meeting in Geneva ended with the aliens promising to return with a formal response from the Galactic Council. As they prepared to leave, Colonel Johnson gave them a message that would haunt their dreams for months afterward. He told them that Americans were looking forward to meeting the rest of the galaxy and hoped they could all be friends. But if friendship was not possible, Americans were prepared for other options. His smile when he said this made the aliens understand that war with humans would not be like any conflict in galactic history. The Galactic Council made their biggest mistake when they decided to test human resolve through a show of force. 3 months after the Geneva meeting, alien battleships appeared in Earth orbit, demanding immediate surrender to galactic authority. They expected humans to submit like every other species had done when faced with superior technology. President Park Chan-wook of South Korea immediately called an emergency session of the United Nations. He suggested opening diplomatic channels and finding a peaceful solution through negotiation. Most world leaders agreed that confrontation with advanced aliens would be suicide for the human race. But when alien ships appeared over New York, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C., The American response was immediate and decisive. Within 30 minutes, every U.S. military base worldwide had activated emergency protocols. Nuclear submarines began moving to attack positions while strategic bombers took off from hidden airfields. The aliens watched in confusion as humans began mobilizing for war, instead of surrendering. No intelligent species had ever chosen to fight against impossible odds when offered the chance to submit peacefully. The Galactic Council had expected Earth to capitulate within hours of the demonstration. Admiral Kim Sun-ho of the Korean Navy worked desperately to coordinate a unified human response through diplomatic channels. He contacted American Admiral Sarah Chen and discovered that U.S. forces were already implementing war plans that had been prepared months earlier, based on the Geneva meeting. Dr. Ko Yuna, a physicist at KAIST, received an emergency call from NASA asking for assistance with weapons research. The Americans had been studying alien technology captured during first contact and believed they had found weaknesses in alien ship design that could be exploited. The alien fleet consisted of 50 massive battleships, each protected by energy shields that could deflect any conventional weapon. Their hulls were made of advanced materials that could absorb tremendous amounts of damage. Commander Vex had assured the Council that no primitive species could threaten such vessels, but the aliens had made a critical error in understanding human psychology. They assumed that, like all herbivore species, humans would calculate the odds of survival and choose submission over death. They did not realize that humans, especially Americans, often chose to fight even when victory seemed impossible. Lieutenant Colonel Johnson appeared on every communication channel connecting Earth to the alien fleet. His message was simple and direct. The alien ships had exactly 30 minutes to withdraw from Earth orbit or face the consequences. After 30 minutes, Earth would consider them hostile targets. The aliens laughed at what they saw as primitive bluffing. How could beings with chemical rockets and nuclear weapons threaten ships protected by technology thousands of years more advanced? They sent messages back to Earth explaining that resistance was futile and surrender was the only option. Commander Vex tried to warn his superiors that they were underestimating human capabilities, but the Council ignored his concerns. They had never encountered a species that would choose death over submission, and could not believe humans were truly willing to fight against impossible odds. Dr. Park Ji-woo spent the crucial 30 minutes working with American scientists to finalize attack plans based on detailed studies of alien ship movements and energy signatures. The aliens had been careless during their months of observation, and humans had learned much about their technology. The attack began exactly 30 minutes after Colonel Johnson delivered his ultimatum, but instead of missiles or energy weapons, the aliens faced something completely unexpected. Every piece of space debris, dead satellite and orbital platform around Earth suddenly became a kinetic weapon aimed at their ships. American Space Command had spent decades tracking thousands of objects in Earth orbit. Old satellites, broken rocket, stages and fragments from previous missions all moved in predictable patterns that could be calculated precisely. Dr. Ko Yuna had helped reprogram these objects to create a devastating swarm attack. The alien shields were designed to stop energy weapons and high-speed missiles, not slow-moving debris that came from every direction simultaneously. Their defensive systems became overwhelmed as thousands of objects struck their ships at precisely calculated angles and velocities. Admiral Chen coordinated the assault from a command center deep beneath the Pentagon, while Admiral Kim provided targeting data from Korean tracking stations. The combined human response used every piece of technology available to turn Earth orbital space into a weapon system. The aliens discovered that human creativity in warfare exceeded anything they had imagined. Instead of building better weapons, humans had weaponized their entire orbital environment, turning space junk into ammunition and satellites into guidance systems for kinetic bombardment. When the alien shields began failing under the unexpected assault, human forces showed no mercy. Nuclear submarines launched missiles from beneath the ocean while stealth bombers attacked from angles the aliens had not anticipated. Every human military system focused on destroying the alien fleet completely. Colonel Johnson broadcast continuous messages to the alien fleet as their ships began exploding. He explained that this was just the beginning and that humans had many more surprises waiting for any species foolish enough to threaten Earth. His voice remained calm and professional throughout the destruction. The Battle of Earth orbit lasted only 6 hours but changed galactic history forever. 47 alien battleships were destroyed or crippled beyond repair. 3 ships managed to escape, but only because American commanders allowed them to flee so they could report what had happened to the Galactic Council. Commander Vex survived the battle, but lost his ship and most of his crew. As he was rescued by a human vessel, he realized that everything he had tried to warn the Council about was true. Humans were not like any other species in the galaxy, and Americans were the most dangerous humans of all. The aftermath of the battle revealed the true extent of human preparations. Americans had spent months since first contact developing contingency plans for exactly this scenario. They had studied alien technology weaknesses and prepared countermeasures that exploited every vulnerability. Dr. Lim Min Seo studied the battle reports and realized that Americans had approached potential conflict with aliens the same way they approached every military challenge. They assumed the enemy would be tough and prepared overwhelming responses that ensured victory through superior planning and firepower. The 3 alien ships that escaped carried a message that terrified the Galactic Council. Humans had not just defeated their fleet, they had destroyed it completely, using improvised weapons and tactics that no civilized species would consider. The herbivore mindset could not comprehend such ruthless efficiency, but the real shock was yet to come, because humans did not celebrate victory and return to peaceful activities like every other species would have done. Instead, they began preparing for the next phase of conflict with typical American thoroughness and determination. Within days of the battle, human scientists were reverse engineering captured alien technology, while military leaders planned offensive operations against alien homeworlds. The prey animals had made the mistake of threatening apex predators on their own territory, and now they would learn what that mistake would cost them. The galaxy had never seen anything like what happened next. Instead of celebrating their defensive victory and returning to normal life, humans did something that shocked every civilized species. They followed the fleeing aliens home and began hunting them across interstellar space. Dr. Zhang Wu-jin, a nuclear physicist from Seoul National University, worked around the clock with American engineers to reverse engineer faster than light travel from captured alien technology. Most species took centuries to develop FTL capability, but humans accomplished it in 6 weeks through methods that terrified alien observers. The humans did not build exploration ships or trading vessels like every other species had done when they first achieved interstellar flight. Instead, they constructed warships designed for one purpose: hunting and killing alien fleets wherever they could be found across the galaxy. Captain Park Ki-young commanded the first human strike force that appeared in the Altarian home system. Without warning, the aliens expected formal declarations of war and structured battles like civilized species conducted. Instead, they got surgical strikes against military targets, followed by immediate withdrawal before reinforcements could respond. The alien military had no experience fighting an enemy that refused to follow accepted rules of warfare. Humans would appear, suddenly destroy exactly what they intended to destroy, and vanish before defensive forces could organize a response. It was like being hunted by ghosts that struck without warning. Colonel Anderson led American Special Forces in raids against alien supply bases and communication centers. His teams would infiltrate heavily defended installations, eliminate key targets, and escape without being detected until hours after the damage was discovered. The aliens had never faced enemies who moved like shadows. Dr. Lee Yu-na, a xenobiologist, spent months studying captured aliens to identify psychological and biological weaknesses that could be exploited in combat. Her research revealed that herbivore species had fundamental limitations that predator species like humans could use to their advantage. The aliens discovered that humans did not just fight wars, they studied their enemies with scientific precision. Every raid provided new information about alien capabilities and weaknesses that was immediately incorporated into future attack plans. Fighting humans was like being dissected by intelligent wolves. American intelligence services began mapping alien trade routes, communication networks, and supply chains with the same thoroughness they had once used to study Soviet military capabilities during the Cold War. Within months, they knew more about Galactic Council infrastructure than most member species. Each human attack was carefully calculated to cause maximum psychological damage while achieving specific military objectives. Captain Park would arrive, in a system destroy a military outpost and leave behind evidence that his forces could have eliminated civilian targets, but chose not to. The message was clear. We are not here to conquer you today, but we could if we wanted to. The aliens realized they were fighting an enemy that understood psychological warfare better than they understood technology. Humans would broadcast messages, explaining that the attacks would stop immediately if the Galactic Council agreed to negotiate new treaties that recognized Earth as an independent power. But the most terrifying aspect of human military operations was their efficiency. Dr. Kim Hye-jin studied battle reports and realized that humans never wasted ammunition or personnel on unnecessary targets. Every shot fired, and every soldier deployed, served a specific purpose in achieving strategic objectives. The Altarian Empire tried to organize a coordinated response, but discovered that their military was designed for policing rebellious member species, not fighting a determined enemy that refused to engage in conventional battles. Their ships were too slow and their tactics too predictable to catch human raiders. Colonel Johnson appeared on alien communication networks to explain American military doctrine in terms that herbivore species could understand. Americans did not want to exterminate aliens. They simply wanted to establish clear rules about who was in charge of human space and what would happen to anyone who violated those rules. The galaxy watched in growing horror as human fleets began appearing in systems throughout Galactic Council territory. Americans had developed a strategy of simultaneous operations that kept alien forces constantly off balance and unable to predict where the next attack would come. Dr. Ko Yuna worked with NASA engineers to develop new weapons specifically designed to exploit alien weaknesses that Dr. Lee had identified through biological research. These weapons were not intended to kill efficiently but to cause terror among species that had never experienced true predator behavior. The aliens sent desperate messages to other galactic powers asking for assistance against the human threat. But every advanced species in the galaxy were herbivores who had achieved peace by avoiding conflict. None had military forces capable of fighting predators who treated warfare as a natural extension of hunting behavior. Captain Kim Do-hyun of the Korean Space Force coordinated with American strike forces to ensure that human operations covered the maximum amount of galactic territory with minimum resources. The aliens learned that humans could project power across vast distances while maintaining perfect coordination between different units. The psychological impact of human operations exceeded their military effectiveness. Alien civilians lived in constant fear that human raiders might appear in their system at any moment. Their governments could not provide security because humans struck targets that seemed random but were actually carefully selected for maximum terror value. American psychological operations specialists began broadcasting human entertainment throughout alien space. Movies about human wars, documentaries about apex predators, and music celebrating victory in battle-filled alien communication networks. The aliens could not escape reminders that they were sharing space with a species that considered violence natural and necessary. The Galactic Council tried to organize peace negotiations, but discovered that humans had conditions that no herbivore species could accept. Earth demanded recognition as a sovereign power with the right to establish military bases throughout the galaxy for defensive purposes. They wanted veto power over all council decisions that might affect human interests. But the most shocking demand was that humans wanted the right to recruit allies from other species and provide them with military protection in exchange for support. Within months, 12 species had requested human military advisors, and 6 had asked to join a defensive alliance with Earth. The aliens realized that humans were not trying to conquer the galaxy through traditional military occupation. Instead, they were establishing a protection system that would make them the dominant power through voluntary cooperation, backed by the constant threat of overwhelming force. Commander Vex, now a prisoner of war on a human ship, tried to explain to his captors that the Galactic Council would never surrender to predator species, no matter how many battles they lost. The herbivore mindset could not accept domination by creatures they considered naturally inferior. Colonel Anderson smiled when he heard this and explained that Americans had dealt with stubborn enemies before. Sometimes it took years of continuous pressure before unreasonable opponents finally accepted reality. Humans were prepared to hunt aliens across the galaxy for as long as necessary to achieve their objectives. The hunt had only just begun, and the aliens were learning that they had awakened something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Humans, especially Americans, were predators who never gave up once they decided to eliminate a threat. The aliens discovered that Americans had perfected something far more dangerous than conventional weapons. They had mastered the art of breaking enemy morale without firing a shot. While Korean forces provided strategic support and technological innovation, Americans specialized in psychological operations that terrorized herbivore species more effectively than direct military attacks. Dr. Yu Hana, a military strategist from the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, observed American tactics with professional admiration and growing concern. She realized that Americans approached psychological warfare the same way they approached every military challenge, with scientific precision and ruthless efficiency. Colonel Martinez began appearing on alien news networks across the galaxy, speaking in calm, friendly tones about human military capabilities. She would smile pleasantly while discussing how humans had once dropped nuclear weapons on their own cities just to test their destructive power. Her casual attitude toward mass destruction horrified alien audiences. The Americans discovered that herbivore species had psychological vulnerabilities that could be exploited through carefully crafted propaganda. Dr. Kim Hye-jin worked with American specialists to develop messages that seemed like friendly cultural exchange, but were actually designed to cause terror among prey animal mentalities. Americans would broadcast documentaries about human military history, showing footage of massive battles and explaining tactical concepts in educational tones. Alien viewers learned that humans considered warfare a natural part of civilization and had developed increasingly efficient methods of killing each other over thousands of years. The psychological campaign reached its peak when Americans began sharing human entertainment throughout galactic communication networks. Movies about predators hunting prey, nature documentaries showing lions attacking gazelles, and music celebrating victory in battlefield alien media systems 24 hours per day. Captain Kim Do-hyun worked with American psychological operations teams to ensure that every alien species received content specifically designed to exploit their particular fears and cultural weaknesses. The messages were not threats, they were educational materials that happened to reveal terrifying truths about human nature. The aliens could not escape constant reminders that they were sharing space with apex predators who had evolved by killing everything that threatened them. Human broadcasts showed how predators on Earth hunted in coordinated packs using intelligence and cooperation to bring down prey much larger than themselves. Colonel Johnson appeared on alien diplomatic channels to discuss human philosophy and explain why Americans believed that violence was often the most practical solution to complex problems. He spoke about concepts like peace through strength and the right of might in tones that suggested these were universal truths any intelligent species should understand. The Americans revealed that they had spent decades studying alien psychology through careful observation during diplomatic contacts. They knew exactly which images, sounds, and concepts would cause maximum psychological distress among herbivore species who had never developed predator instincts. Dr. Lee Yu-na published research papers that were distributed throughout alien academic networks explaining the biological differences between predator and prey species. Her work demonstrated that humans were evolutionarily designed for hunting and killing, while most galactic species were designed to avoid conflict and flee from danger. The psychological warfare campaign included subtle elements that were even more effective than obvious propaganda. Americans would casually mention their military capabilities during routine diplomatic communications, always in friendly tones that made the information seem like normal conversation rather than deliberate intimidation. Sergeant Rodriguez gave interviews to alien journalists where she discussed her combat experience with the same enthusiasm other people might use to talk about their hobbies. She described killing enemy soldiers and destroying military equipment as satisfying work that provided a sense of accomplishment and professional pride. The aliens began to understand that Americans did not consider warfare a necessary evil or unfortunate reality. They genuinely enjoyed military conflict and viewed it as an opportunity to demonstrate superior skill and intelligence. This attitude was incomprehensible to herbivore species who saw violence as something to be avoided at all costs. American. Psychological operations included recruiting programs designed to attract alien allies through promises of protection and partnership. The messages emphasized that cooperation with humans meant safety from anyone who might threaten peaceful species, while resistance meant facing the full power of human military capabilities. Dr. Park Ji-woo worked with American intelligence services to identify alien leaders who might be willing to cooperate with human objectives. These individuals received special attention through targeted propaganda that emphasized the benefits of alliance with Earth while highlighting the consequences of continued opposition. The psychological campaign was so effective that many alien species began requesting human military advisors without being directly threatened. The constant stream of information about human capabilities convinced them that cooperation was preferable to the alternatives that might result from continued conflict. Americans demonstrated their understanding of alien psychology by offering reasonable terms for surrender that allowed herbivore species to maintain dignity while accepting human dominance. The aliens were given face-saving options that made submission seem like intelligent pragmatism rather than cowardly capitulation. Captain Park Ki-young coordinated with American specialists to ensure that military operations supported psychological objectives rather than simply achieving tactical victories. Every human attack was designed to reinforce the message that resistance was futile, while cooperation offered benefits for all parties involved. The aliens realized that humans had turned psychological warfare into a precise science that attacked the fundamental nature of herbivore mentality. Americans understood that prey animals could be controlled more effectively through fear and intimidation than through physical force alone. Colonel Anderson explained American psychological doctrine to captured alien officers in terms they could understand. Americans had learned that breaking enemy morale was more efficient than destroying enemy forces because demoralized opponents would surrender without requiring expensive military campaigns. The psychological warfare campaign included elements designed to recruit human allies from among alien populations. Americans would identify individuals within alien societies who admired human military capabilities and provide them with information and support that allowed them to influence their own governments. Dr. Yu Hana studied the results of American psychological operations and concluded that they were more effective than conventional military campaigns in achieving strategic objectives. The herbivore mindset was fundamentally vulnerable to predator psychology in ways that could be exploited through careful planning and execution. The aliens sent desperate messages throughout the galaxy, warning other species about human psychological warfare capabilities. But their warnings only reinforced the effectiveness of American propaganda by demonstrating that even describing human tactics caused fear among civilized species. American psychological operations specialists monitored alien communications to measure the effectiveness of their campaigns and adjust tactics based on observed results. They treated psychological warfare like any other military capability that could be improved through scientific study and practical experience. The final psychological blow came when Americans began demonstrating that they could recruit alien allies not through conquest or coercion, but by proving that cooperation with humans provided better security than reliance on Galactic Council protection. Within months, entire alien civilizations were requesting to join human alliance systems. The aliens discovered that American psychological warfare was not designed to destroy them, but to convince them that cooperation with humans was in their own best interests. The predators had learned that voluntary submission was more valuable than forced obedience, because willing allies were more reliable than conquered enemies. The psychological campaign succeeded beyond American expectations when the Galactic Council began internal discussions about negotiating peace terms with Earth. The herbivore leadership realized that continued resistance would only result in more species defecting to human alliance systems, leaving the Council weaker and more isolated. The war ended not with a final battle, but with the complete psychological collapse of Galactic Council resistance. Faced with the choice between total destruction and negotiated surrender, the alien leadership chose survival over pride. But the galaxy they surrendered to was fundamentally different from the one that had first discovered Earth 2 years earlier. President Kim Seong-ho of the unified Korean Peninsula worked closely with American Secretary of State Williams to establish new galactic treaties that would govern relations between humans and alien species. But these agreements were not the gentle diplomatic arrangements that had maintained peace among herbivore civilizations for millennia. The new treaties were predator contracts written by hunters who understood that prey animals required clear rules and absolute certainty about consequences for breaking those rules. Every clause was designed to maintain human dominance while providing alien species with security and prosperity in exchange for cooperation. Dr. Shin Bo-Ra became Earth's first galactic ambassador and established protocols that seemed reasonable to alien negotiators but actually ensured continued human control through carefully structured dependency relationships. Any species could challenge human decisions, but they had to be prepared for the consequences of being wrong about human intentions or capabilities. The aliens discovered that humans, especially Americans, did not want to rule the galaxy directly, through traditional colonial administration. That would require too much bureaucracy and not enough hunting, which went against their fundamental predator nature. Instead, they created a system where Earth became the galaxy's unofficial enforcer of peace and stability. When alien species had disputes, they could not resolve through normal diplomatic channels. They came to human arbitrators for final judgment. The humans would listen to all sides, study the evidence, and make decisions that were usually fair and reasonable. But everyone understood that human judgments were final and would be enforced through overwhelming military power if necessary. Captain Park Ki-young established the first human military base outside the solar system, on a strategically located asteroid that commanded major galactic trade routes. The base was officially described as a defensive installation, but everyone knew it was a statement that humans could project power anywhere in the galaxy within days of making the decision to do so. The galaxy learned to live with predators in charge and surprisingly discovered that the new system worked better than anyone had expected. Piracy disappeared almost overnight, when criminal organizations learned that humans considered hunting pirates an entertaining recreational activity, rather than tedious police work.